The June primary was an unnecessarily difficult voting process, according to UNM political science professor Gabriel Sanchez. He wrote that in a policy brief released a few weeks ago after the election, in which he also pointed out the steps the state can and should take to improve the situation. Here's correspondent Gwyneth Dolan with more in a special Your New Mexico Government interview.
Professor Sanchez, thank you so much for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
You have just released a paper in which you say that New Mexico's cumbersome election laws impose preventable burdens on voters. What did this look like in the June primary?
Yeah, I think with my colleagues at UCLA, we've been doing a lot of work across the country, just analyzing what's happening with the elections right now in the context of COVID and trying to identify, in our opinion, relatively straightforward and simple fixes to some of the issues that we've seen. Here in New Mexico, probably the one that's caught the most attention is a pretty large number, and it's still being quantified, of how many folks didn't get their ballot counted because it didn't get right to the Secretary of State's office to be counted on time. And so I think one of the relatively simple fixes is, we've suggested that you can essentially canvass all absentee ballots postmarked on election day that might not have been received until up to 7 days is what we're suggesting after the election. And a lot of this isn't the Secretary of State's fault. It's not county clerk's fault. We all know, right? The Postal Service is overwhelmed right now, and there's a lot of delays. So in our opinion, you can address that, right, with our legislation and just allow those ballots, right, to be essentially counted if they're postmarked, but they don't actually get to where they're intended until up to 7 days. And I know that the challenge is, you don't get the results as quickly as you might like, but I think it's more important to make sure everybody who actually intended to fill out their ballot on time, if it's postmarked, that gets counted.
You also found that there was confusion about those deadlines. And, we're all accustomed, well, maybe not all of us, to paying our taxes at the last minute. And, the IRS is good as long as you're postmarked by their deadline. So I think there probably are a lot of people who weren't sure when things had to be done.
Yeah, and keep in mind for the primary, right, this was by far the greatest number of people who have voted by absentee ever before in state history. So that means you've got a lot of folks who are used to voting in person that utilize this for the first time. And just like anything else, you do it for the first time. Unfortunately, there's a lot of uncertainty and folks might make some mistakes. And I think the point of this is just to ensure that folks have a little bit of a grace period, particularly because if it's postmarked by election day, right, it's outside of their control whether or not it actually gets there on time.
One of the other things that you mentioned was not enough control in tracking your request for the ballot and where it is and where it's going. What did that look like?
Yeah, I think positively, and I want to stress that I think our state actually did an incredible job in arguably the most difficult election to administer in state's history. So this is not to be overly critical, but hopefully helpful in identifying some of the simple things that can be done. And on the positive side, this was actually news for me because I had never voted by absentee before this election, that you can actually get on the webpage and track, in theory, where it's at in the process. So you as a voter can identify, oh, wait, it hasn't got there yet. Maybe I should actually show up on election day and make sure my ballot got in or fill out a provisional. That's incredibly helpful, but it requires voters to go a couple of steps themselves and puts a little bit more cost on the voter's perspective. So one of the things that a lot of states do is essentially establish a curing process for rejected ballots and essentially puts a little bit more stress on the state to really contact voters and say, hey, your ballot was flagged, it was rejected, and gives them a time period to be able to address that. If it wasn't the signature in the right place, if there wasn't something that was done, it basically allows the voter to be informed about that and gives them some time to correct it. And again, I think that's an important step because it also increases trust in voters to use the absentee ballot process, particularly if we start to see incredible spikes in COVID as November comes around. A lot of folks might be really hoping to trust this system so they don't have to go vote in person. I think that step could do a long way to improving trust.
You also found, and we talked about this before the election, problems with disenfranchising Native American voters. So what did you find in your paper?
Well, I think, in my opinion, that's the biggest issue to tackle. I mean, little small things, you never want to see voters disenfranchised, period, right? Nobody ever wants to see that. But if it's not systemic, meaning there's not a particular group or class of people that are being disproportionately impacted by our system, that's really where I focus a lot of my energy. And in the primary, we know that unfortunately our Native American community was disproportionately impacted for two reasons. One, a lot of those folks don't have physical addresses. So being able to request an absentee ballot is more cumbersome for them. They might have to leave their reservation on more than one occasion to be able to even mail out their ballot and access it, and all those different things. It's just more cost for them. And probably the most important was, unfortunately, because COVID is impacting those communities at a much higher rate, right? There was decisions made in partnership with tribes to not have polling centers on reservation lands, which normally happens in most of these places. So that again puts added pressure on those folks to have to leave their community to be able to vote in person if they have challenges doing so in terms of absentee ballots. That again disproportionately impacts one specific segment of our community, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, recalling that we're in a pandemic, we're trying to make it easier for people to vote with an absentee ballot. And here we have this group of people who we're essentially forcing to leave their houses and go much farther than folks who live in Albuquerque or Las Cruces or whatever. You mentioned the non-traditional addresses. We all know someone who lives kind of far out, and the directions to get there are you make a left at the big tree and you go through two, ranch gates and you make a right. Why does this matter?
Well, I think the challenge is, right, if we're thinking about absentee ballots, that's specifically designated to a physical address for a lot of good reasons, right? In many cases, you cannot vote on a particular election if you don't live in that jurisdiction, right? So if it's county commissioner, a lot of these lower ballot races, right, not everybody gets to weigh in with a vote on those issues. So having a physical address makes a lot of sense. But what if you're one of those individuals that lives in a rural area of our state who doesn't have a physical address? Again, that complicates things for you. That makes things a little bit more difficult. That adds more costs for you to be able to access, right, the ballot, particularly in the context of an absentee ballot where all of that is driven for the most part by a physical address.
We also have, there are jurisdictions in New Mexico that are still required by the Voting Rights Act to provide access for folks who do not speak English or Spanish. And so, we have these translators who are typically posted at the polling sites. But how does that work with voting by mail?
Yeah, see, this is the complexity, right? Most of us would say it's the devil's in the details when you're looking at laws or policies, right? And so the Voting Rights Act particularly protects what are called language minorities. We typically think of those as Spanish speakers nationally, but here in New Mexico, that includes a number of different tribal languages. And so one step that is taken often is to have translators on election day, available for folks who don't speak English. That's great. But in the context of COVID, again, we're seeing record numbers of people not showing up to vote in person. So our suggestion is, right, have essentially everything that goes out in terms of the election, the request for an absentee ballot, the absentee ballot itself, all of that information available in those other languages beyond English, and in this context, even Spanish. And our research team, they did a lot of spot checking. They called essentially every county office to request information about other languages. And in almost every case, folks didn't actually know if that was actually taking place, right? And I think that just identifies, again, a relatively simple thing that can happen if we plan ahead and we just translate all that information into those languages ahead of time so that folks don't feel like they have to go to vote in person because that's the only place I can get translation.
Now, the state legislature was in session when your policy brief came out. Did they take any of your advice?
Well, I think there was a couple of very positive steps. Like most things, I will say there was some positive steps that were taken. There definitely could have been more, and I think there still can be more that takes place before the November election. So on two positives, one, very similar to the primary, the county clerks will mail applications for absentee ballots out to each mailable voter in their respective county. So I think that's a very positive step, right? It's I think giving the voters the opportunity to respond to that request instead of me having to figure out how do I request a ballot. I think that's a positive step. We saw that work in the context of the primary, I would say positively, much higher turnout, almost record turnout for a primary without presidential candidates to vote on in the primary. Why did that happen? My answer is because we simplified the process and made it easier for voters. So I think that's a positive. And second, in the context of tribal voters, which again, Native Americans, in my opinion, are the most important group to focus on because we know they face challenges during the primary. The legislation that was passed and signed by our governor essentially says there will be no significant changes to polling locations without written consent and request by tribes. I think that step really respects tribal sovereignty and shows the state wants to work in concert with tribes and not make any unilateral decisions that would negatively impact tribes. So I think those are very positive steps. Were there other things that could be done? Obviously, the brief suggested a handful of other things that didn't make it into legislation. But I think we should respect the two important things that were done and hopefully build on that between now and November and moving forward.
So, back in early June, we were still thinking it might be possible the pandemic could kind of wrap up. Now it seems increasingly likely we'll be in a similar position for November. So they made some changes, the governor signed them. What will your top priorities be going into the next legislative session? If a lawmaker asked you, hey, now we have a chance, some of what they just did was temporary. We have a chance in a longer session to do this more seriously. What would your bullet points be? Do these three things.
I think number one is we've seen the positive benefits of really increasing access to absentee mail-based ballots in New Mexico. Why should that be temporary? Why can't we always mail requests for absentee ballots out to every eligible voter, period? Right? I think many states, our neighbor to the north of Colorado, has exclusive mail-based voting, right? I'm not necessarily saying go all the way there, but why not always make mail-based voting more accessible to folks, regardless of whether or not we're in a health scare or not? I think that would be number one. Number two, I think thinking more deeply about how to just assume COVID-19 is going to be there in November and try to do as much for tribal entities as possible. The thing that we recommend in our brief is why not have polling precincts on or very close to tribal lands that only tribal members can access. That way you don't have non-tribal members violating, right, a lot of tribes' well-intentioned policies to restrict access to keep COVID-19 down. Why not think about that, right? And I think that could be done between now and November if we really wanted to do so. And third, especially if we think about increasing access to mail-based ballots moving forward, I think that curing process is incredibly important. And again, curing just basically means if you identify there's a problem with the ballot, inform that voter and give them adequate time to be able to address that so that their vote can be counted. I think the worry for me is if folks don't know that they had a concern with their ballot in the first place, they're not going to take any appropriate steps to try to address that, and their vote won't be counted, and they probably would never even know that.
All right, we'll keep those in mind for the next session. Thank you so much for being with us.
Always a pleasure to be on with you folks. Thanks for having me.